These are the 6 steps to personal freedom. My name is Tim Francis. I'm an entrepreneur in Austin, Texas. I've been a guest lecturer at Yale, NYU, University of Texas, and I've been an entrepreneur for over 10 years. These 6 levels I have come to really dislike, honestly. My pretty little ego and my small mind oftentimes gets in the way for me being able to really just live a happier, more free life. I would not blame you if at many points in this video you dislike me too, because I have disliked myself and I've been frustrated with my own feelings and thoughts many times too, so I wouldn't blame you. In this video, I'm going to share with you what the 6 steps are to personal freedom. Each of them actually is a level, and we have an opportunity to ascend those levels if you choose. Each level that I'm going to give you has clear questions that you can ask each step along the way to get that next level of freedom. I'll say that each level has a light side and a dark side, and it's about being able to find the light side and turn away from the dark side as much as our ego and our mind may not want to. I'll also say that we can be at different levels on different topics. It's not like we're permanently at one level or another. Also, I'd say by the end of this video, if you choose to take on some of the challenges and questions that I offer through this video, that you may end up feeling vastly happier, vastly lighter. And there might be a few confronting moments along the way as well. I'd like to mention that I'm pulling directly from this book. It's called Relationships That Work by Dr. David Wolfe. Specifically, this is the 2nd edition. So where I mention page numbers, if you've got the 2nd edition, then the page numbers will correspond. Okay, so here we go. Dr. David Wolfe, he oftentimes quotes Devo, a band that in the 1980s came out with a song called Freedom of Choice. This is going to become an important quote for the rest of our time here together in this video, is this quote from Devo. Freedom of choice is what you've got. Freedom from choice is what you want. Now you might be saying, Tim, I definitely want freedom. That quote makes no sense. By the end of this video, I have a feeling you may feel differently. All right, the 6 levels of personal responsibility, they are as follows. 1, blame others. 2, blame self. 3, illusion of transcendence. Those are the first 3 levels. Those are the victim levels. And then after that, I'll give you the 3 responsibility levels. And ideally, at least in my life, I want to be ascending to the very top as much as possible. These first 3 levels, I'm going to go through them relatively quickly, simply because they probably feel fairly familiar. And perhaps if you're watching a video like this, you've already transcended some of these levels already. Now, along the way, I'm also going to share 3 pretty heartbreaking stories from my life. And I'm going to show you different versions of those same stories at the 6 levels. So the 3 stories are, number 1, this is a true story. I was a touring drummer. My band broke up 20 minutes before going on stage at the Western Canadian Music Awards, and we never played again, despite 6 years of practicing, performing, songwriting, recording. We had airplay in 8 cities and towns, honestly more towns than cities. We had 3 sponsors, we played 150 shows, and we'd made it to the WCMAs, and we broke up 20 minutes before going on stage. Still played the show, but that was the last time we ever performed. Around that time, going all the way back to 2008, I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the real estate market crash. I was one of the people that lost a ton of money. And what made it even harder was that a lot of the money I had was investor money. So I had to go one by one to all the investors and tell them that I screwed up. And it took me 7 years to pay them all back. It was incredibly painful. Third story, there was a mentor that I had around that time as well, where I thought this guy walked on water. I thought that he was the uber mentor of mentors, and anything he said I would do. And he seemed like an incredibly successful guy, and all I had to do was just follow in his footsteps, and I too could be financially free and successful. Due to some of his reckless choices, he ended up being the lead promoter of a $12 million Ponzi scheme. The owner of the scheme was convicted in court, given a $250,000 fine, and barred from holding securities for 25 years, and then left the country. I mean, it was the stuff of movies. All 3 of these stories, I'm going to walk you through these 6 levels of responsibility. So let's talk about level 1. So again, these first 3 levels are very much in the victim mind space. The first is level 1, blame others. It's someone else or something else's fault. It's my band member's fault. It's the real estate market's fault. It's my mentor's fault. You can put whatever you want in there. That is the blame others level. Now, if you're going to move beyond that level, then you need to start looking at yourself. And so that takes us to level 2. Still in the victim space, this level 2 is blame self. So that's saying like, I'm such a failure. So for example, when it came to real estate, I could not believe that I lost $250,000. It was my responsibility. I'm such an idiot. When it came to the band, if I'm being honest, like it wasn't super rosy in the final kind of weeks and months. There was kind of some cracks are starting to show. You know, I'm such an idiot for allowing it to go on longer than it should have. And with my mentor, like I'm such a fool for believing some of his ridiculous claims. So that's level 2, blaming self. Level 3, there's this tricky little spot in our 6 levels. It's called level 3. It's the illusion of transcendence. So in illusion of transcendence, we speak a really good spiritual game. We may say things like, oh, well, it's all just God's plan, or I know I'm not a victim, or, I really attract everything that happens to me. Now, those actually can be really productive and helpful statements. However, if a person's at level 3, they may be saying them, but it's actually just a bypass to avoid truly dealing with what actually has happened here. It's called a spiritual bypass for that reason. And for me, I would say I didn't spend too much time in level 3 because I was just too busy in level 2 blaming other people. So I've been a very strong level 2 person. I haven't spent too much time at level 3. Or maybe I'm just, I'm deluded about that myself. So actually, come to think of it, I've been very stuck at level 3. Let's be honest. Here's how you know. Okay, here's how you know. If you are saying things like, it's all just God's plan, or I know I'm not a victim, but you're still deep down inside really pissed or really hurt or really regretful or resentful or whatever, good chance you're stuck in level 3, which is that illusion of transcendence level. I spent a lot of time there. Let's be real. Now that I think about it, I've definitely spent a lot of time there. Definitely guilty. So that's level 3. Now, once we move out of level 3, this is where we oftentimes need help of like an exercise or two. And this is where we move from blaming others and blaming ourselves to actually starting to get some new freedom. And we move into the top 3, which is no longer the victim level, it's the responsibility level. Level 4 is called the emotional or experiential responsibility level. And what gets us from level 3 to level 4 is oftentimes noticing long after something has finished that we're still very affected by it. Now, obviously, if it's the day after the Western Canadian Music Awards and I'm heartbroken that my band that I've been with for 6 years has ended, of course I'm going to feel sad. That's perfectly fine. But if it's like 3 years later and I am still feeling angry and upset and bitter and resentful, there's probably an opportunity for me to take a look at where I could take more responsibility for the situation. That's an example of where I was stuck in level 3, illusion of transcendence, when in fact I had not yet done the growth to go to full responsibility. So a great exercise to start looking at level 4, I recommend you do the following. Number 1, write down where you have chronic complaints. Maybe it's about yourself. I just can't seem to lose the last 10 pounds. I'm always late for meetings. I always seem to be broke. I'm frustrated. I'm sad. Or maybe it's feeling heartbroken about that relationship from 10 years earlier. Maybe you feel resentful for someone who did you wrong. Maybe it is a moment where you really regret a missed opportunity. So anytime that you have a very unwanted emotion, that's what Dr. Wolf, author of the book, calls a grungy. Now, a grungy could be any number of unpleasant emotions. It could be pain, fear, guilt, anger, worry, martyrdom, anxiety, sadness, tiredness, depression. In fact, tiredness can actually be a grungy. If someone is, perpetually not wanting to go to work or not wanting to have that tough conversation, they just always seem to get tired at just that moment. Maybe there's something conspicuous there. Now, is feeling tired, is there a legitimate version of that? Absolutely yes. Is there a perfectly understandable place where being afraid makes a ton of sense? Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty good with being terrified of grizzly bears in my home country of Canada. I live in Austin, Texas now, but I'm from Canada. Being afraid of a grizzly bear is a very good thing. So there's very productive versions of all this. We just have to be careful, though, where we're deceiving ourselves that actually the emotion we're feeling is covering up something else. Now, why could we ever want to feel pain, fear, guilt, resentment, et cetera, et cetera? Well, the only reason that we would ever want that would be because we get something from it. Now, we might say, well, Tim, I can't imagine why I would ever want to feel anxious or frustrated. Check out this list. Again, this comes from the book Relationships That Work. Payoffs could include things like getting recognition, having an excuse for something, deceiving others, or protecting ourselves. And those payoffs can be very compelling. So when I think back to my life and I think about losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in the '08 real estate crash, I felt humiliated. And I didn't just feel humiliated at that time. I felt humiliated for years and years after that. If I look at the list of payoffs that I was getting, it could be any of these. Every person experiences things different. The same exact thing could have happened to you, and you might have a different grungy payoff than me, or maybe none at all. For me, I definitely had a grungy. I felt humiliated, and the payoff that I got was, as long as I felt humiliated, I could deceive myself that the fact of the matter is I wasn't that good as a real estate investor. I wanted to maintain the image of like, well, I've got it all figured out, and I'm going to be a super young real estate mogul. I'm going to be super rich, and everyone's going to look up to me. That's the image I had for myself. And I could keep that alive as long as I continued to like bury myself in humiliation. The moment that I noticed that, suddenly I went, you know what? This is pretty humbling, but all the professional real estate investors that were like very, very good as true long-term investors, not just speculators, they got out of the market long before you heard about real estate being everywhere in the news and every hair salon and masseuse and, 20-something like me is talking all about like, I got to get rich in real estate, right? So that was humbling. I hated it. I hated facing the fact that I actually was not that good. That was tough to hear. But you know what? The moment that I realized that, it set me free. It totally and completely set me free. Also around that time, the whole mentor thing happened. And I felt like such a fool. I felt so embarrassed. And I felt that way for years and years afterwards. And it was only after I did grunges and payoffs that I saw that one of the payoffs that I had was I was actually protecting and justifying a belief that I had that everyone out there should be looking out for one another. That's how the world should work. The fact of the matter is this particular mentor, he was really just kind of concerned with himself, And if there was a young 20-something, again, me coming along saying, hey, let's do this. And yes, I'm going to support you. Whatever you say, I'm going to do it. And just like blind faith, I wanted to believe that the world should take my passion and take care of it. The fact of the matter is everyone's in a different place in their developmental pattern. I happen to know this particular mentor came from a very, very difficult background, both in his family and also the country he came from and all the rest. And so it's very understandable that, the world occurred to him in such a way that like he really just had to think about himself and not get too tied up on what the outcome was of me, the young mentor who's just like ready to do anything. And only once I came to terms with the fact that not everyone is at that level of wanting to look out for one another, I could let that go. And then I came to peace, which just like suddenly I felt so much more free. So I could keep going with examples here, but you can see how in my life, and maybe in your life, if you have an unwanted emotion that just burns kind of deep down inside, and it has for a long time, you might just be getting a payoff for it. And so taking a look at those potential payoffs, there might be something very, very rich for you there. Ultimately, at this level, and this is maybe a hard thing to hear, I know it can be for me, is realizing that we actually have free choice at all times of how we experience something. And that could be as big as a catastrophic financial loss or the end of a relationship, or it could be something as simple as someone cutting us off in traffic. We have choice about our emotions and our experiences. And I think that, it takes courage, humility, and honesty. And those can be very, very, very hard to come by in ourselves. We are so good at deceiving ourselves. At least I know I am. Once we get our arms around level 4, emotional experiential responsibility, and we get some reps in there, we have an opportunity to actually go up another level. And again, you can be at level 2, 3, 4 on some issues, and you can go up to level 5, maybe on a particular issue, you've got more movement. So, it's not like you're always at 4 or always at 5. So allow yourself, maybe one item here, one item there can get you up a level. So what level 5 is, this is what's known as practical responsibility. And it's kind of like, how did I really set up that situation? Maybe unconsciously, maybe consciously, how did I set myself up to fail there? So with the band, if I'm being really honest, yes, I was in all the band practices and all the rehearsals and all the performances and all of the, studio sessions and all the rest, just like everyone else. Beyond that, I worked harder and harder and harder to do things like merchandise and whatnot. And I also was really, really excited to go further and further and put more and more money in. And as the band got bigger and we were touring longer and further and it took more and more money, I didn't check in with the guys. I did not check in with the guys to see what they were good for, like as in what they wanted. I was not really operating in a win-win environment. I wanted the me version of the band. I did not include the others, and I did not create a win-win for them until my vision of how the band should go and the vision the other guys had was just like literally so far apart that, one day the Elastic Band just kind of snapped. There was honestly just different visions for the band. And I think also artistically, I think if I look back, we were starting to drift artistically. And I did not have the consciousness to make sure that I was checking with the guys on what win-win felt like at each and every step. So I set that up. Real estate. When I lost those hundreds of thousands of dollars, if I'm being honest, my deep-seated insecurity about money had me taking wild, unwise risks. And it doesn't change anything that the whole market was that way or that the media was saying like there is no bottom to this market. And it doesn't matter what the collective consciousness was. My personal consciousness is that I was coming from a place of inexperience. The fact of the matter is I just wasn't that good. And that was kind of hard for me to see and painful for me to realize. In terms of my mentor, practically speaking, I had deep-seated desperation. I had already lost a few $100,000 in real estate. My band had broken up and I was clinging to anything just to keep my entrepreneur dream alive, to avoid going back to a day job. And in my desperation, I was ready to believe anyone who could tell me that they could help me get rich quickly. And I mean, I was just waiting to plug my umbilical cord into whoever would tell me that message. So I set that up, and that came out of my deep-seated desperation. And so that had me doing anything and everything this mentor said, actually almost everything. I did stop myself from really promoting his investment, which then turned into a Ponzi scheme. So thankfully, I had just enough discernment still left in me, despite my mass desperation, to not go into those spaces and do something that I really, really, really would feel was like regretful, and at the time would have experienced it as irreversible. There's a really great book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And that book, if a person views it not from level 2, which is blaming self, but from level 5, which is our practical responsibility lens, this is an extraordinary book. Instead of saying like level 2, which is blaming myself, which is like, oh, I'm such an idiot for blah, blah, blah. No. Extreme Ownership says, okay, got it. We got the result that we got. Now, let's take a look. How did we create that? Could we have actually done a checklist before we did the presentation? Could I have practiced once more? Could I have asked for help so that I could be more free to get those practices or to create those checklists, right? It's taking a look at, okay, if I were to say I'm 100% responsible for what happened here, if I take extreme ownership that this was all on me, what becomes available for me? I've run that question through romantic relationships, through businesses, through investments, on and on and on and on. And it is shocking how many times I come up with a list of like 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 items where actually I could have done something different or more that really would have created a different outcome. So quick side quest away from relationships that work into extreme ownership. And now let's go back into relationships that work. Level 6, this is our top level of responsibility. If level 5 is what did I do to create the situation, level 6 is why did I set that up? And specifically, why did I set up that situation with the divine? What lesson was I supposed to learn about myself or the world or my connection to divine itself? And again, this is not a religious presentation. I would say it's spiritual. So whether you are Christian or Jewish or insert religion, I believe this is true. So if I think about the band breaking up in such a relatively harsh and tragic way, right as we were kind of starting to take flight, I think I set up that breakup. I was unwilling to listen to all the early kind of like, yellow alerts, and then the big yellow alerts, and then the small red alerts, and then the big red alerts. And it took a ending that was that dramatic for me to get the memo. Tim, why are you a musician? And if I'm being honest, it was not for the music. It was because I wanted to be famous. And I remember the day after the band broke up, I sat at my dining room table and I literally did a risk analysis on whether I should continue with music or not. And I looked at the situation and I said, well, I know I want to make at least 6 figures a year in my life. And if I'm a top 1% musician in the world and I put 80 hours a week to practicing my rudiments and practicing with the band and recording and songwriting and touring and media and all the rest, what does that look like for me? And it dawned on me that I could be a top 1% musician and still not make $100,000 a year. And then I thought about, okay, well, what if I was a full-time entrepreneur and I spent 80 hours a week on marketing, sales, accounting, finance, legal, operations, whatever the things are. And it dawned on me that if I was a top 1% entrepreneur, that I probably would make 6 figures. In fact, a musician, you would have to be in the top probably 0.0001% to be in a really great spot financially. As an entrepreneur, you only need to be in the top like 1 or 2% to be in a nice financial position. So if I pause right there and I step back, the way that I even process that, is that the mind of someone who's like passionate about being a musician, or is that someone who's passionate about being an entrepreneur? I was bringing an entrepreneur lens to it. There's a lot of musicians that they would do the calculus very differently. They'd say, well, no, I have a really important message to share. I have very, very, deep passion to connect with audiences. And I dearly, dearly want to feel that energetic connection and be of service to the world through the music that I create. And they'd be super embodied with that. And they would probably look at the situation and say, okay, we broke up last night. I'm still a great musician. Why don't I find another band? Or maybe I'll just get other members for this band and I'll keep the band name. Or, the musicians would have seen it in such a different light. And the fact that I didn't see it in that light was a sign I was probably destined to be an entrepreneur. I also think I co-created being in a band for 6 years and playing, on stage dozens and hundreds of times. I co-created that because I needed to get good at being on stage. I believe that me speaking is a huge part of what I do and where I'm headed. And I got to tell you, in the same night, when you duck a beer bottle, true story, and a bra, also true story, and or you're on stage and a light falls over and the heat lights something on fire, also true story, and you learn to extinguish it by grabbing the nearest pitcher of beer and throwing it on there while keeping the song going as a drummer, which is what I did, also true story. that makes you, that's like some pretty amazing, like high level training to be a speaker. And you just can't read that in a book, right? Lo and behold, here I am. And it's like 17 years later, it's 2025 as I record this, and the band was together in 2008. I think we broke up in 2008. And I will tell you, I've now spoken like over 1,000 times in different contexts. I've spoken on podcasts, on webinars. I've spoken on stages. I've spoken in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Bermuda. I've been on the websites of Forbes and Inc. magazine. And I've spoken at Yale and NYU and UTexas MBA program. Like, there's a lot of speaking that's been happening in my life. And my ability to be calm on stage, even when the clicker breaks down or the projector won't work, I learned that emotional regulation from ducking beer bottles and bras, straight up, right? So there's so many ways that I co-created the band existing and also that I co-created the band ending. And it was such a gift from God that it existed and also that it ended. In real estate, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I lost, I had to lose those. I co-created that with God, again, something like 17, 18 years ago, because I needed to learn to respect money, and not just a little bit of money, but significant sums of money. In the last 8 years-ish, I've been a part of 150 board meetings. I've been a part of decisions where hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars, go one direction or another. And my profound respect for money and my profoundly important view that money's like a knife in the hand of a surgeon. It saves a life. In the hand of a murderer, it takes a life. To think about money with such care and reverence and respect, you can read about that 100 times in a book, but you only really get it in moments of trial and extreme trial, like losing a couple $100,000, mostly of other people's money, having to come face to face with them and say, I screwed up and it's on me and I'll make you whole, and then taking 7 years to pay everyone back. That is a level of respect for money that you just don't get by reading a book. And I had to go through that so that I would be ready and respectful to handle far, far, far larger decisions and sums of money. In terms of my mentor, he was a speaker, and that's how I met him, was at an event when he was speaking. And I needed to experience the losses that I did with him. And again, thankfully, I never did promote the Ponzi scheme. I had to see the wildfire level of devastation that came out of him making reckless decisions and speaking about those reckless decisions and promoting reckless decisions right from stage. I needed to see the power of the microphone. As I just mentioned, I've spoken many, many, many times. And from all the speaking I've done, I've been around hundreds, if not thousands of other speakers. And sometimes I see speakers where they're a little bit loose with their word about how they got the information they got, or their credibility or their track record. And they're kind of massaging the edges just to make a better speech. And to me, I think that's very dangerous. I think it is such a privilege to have a microphone. In fact, I thank you so much for being here and hearing what I have to say. And I don't think that my reverence and respect for the platform of a mic or a YouTube channel or a stage, I don't think it would be there had I not seen the downside and the devastation of my mentor, who did not respect the impact and the influence that comes from being on stage, that comes from having a mic in his hand. So to me, I created that with God. I created that breakdown. And there are a lot of lessons that I got from that. There's no question, though, that the way I co-created that with the divine was absolutely necessary for my own personal development. And I'm just lucky that I didn't lose a limb along the way, literally or figuratively. Ducking beer bottles, you can lose an eye, right? So I'm going to zoom out just another degree further to make this a lot more recent. I actually think COVID was co-created the way that the whole world shut down. I'm not here to debate, how appropriate different countries were in handling it. That is just an endless sea of opinions. And maybe one day it's a conversation you and I could have. I think the learning point, though, here, because we're talking about personal responsibility, is I was absolutely amazed at how much countries and entire industries suddenly figured out solutions to long-standing challenges. So for example, in kind of old school industries like law, finance, banking, insurance, for many, many years, one of the challenges has been, well, maybe like I have to go in to the courthouse for the deposition, or I have to go to the bank to prove, to withdraw some money or show my identity or something, or I have to, I can only do a certain kind of meeting if it's in person with an insurance agent or something, right? And industry people there just cross their arms and are just like, nope, can't do that online, not possible, got to do it in person. Well, goodness gracious, within about 4 weeks of the pandemic hitting, people got real resourceful real quick. And suddenly court cases are happening on Zoom, right? Suddenly now digital signatures are accepted. Suddenly now insurance questionnaires are happening in a way that previously were impossible. The world figured it out. And there's just so much wasted time, energy, and money from people not doing things remotely that COVID really cleared it out. It cut a lot of the fat out of the system. Now, I won't speak to like the impact on people per se. I mean, there's a lot of depression. There's like kind of a lost generation, if you will, of kids that, whether it's a high school kid who didn't go to their 12th grade graduation, or, I have family members like little nephews that they lost some of their childhood playtime with kids in some very important developmental years because they were sheltering in place. They were in lockdowns. So there are downsides, and I do not want to step over those. I would just say, though, that it was not all downside during the pandemic. There was so much good that actually came out of it for so many people. And I bet you for all of us, if we look hard enough, and you may need to squint, there probably was good for you too, even if it's not obvious. One other example, I'm Canadian and I live in Austin, Texas. And I have to say, it's been difficult to hear the current US president, Donald Trump, talk about how he wants to make my country the 51st state. And what's even tougher is when he says things that are not true. And to me, for quite some time, that kind of got to me. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yo, I'm down for the 6 levels of responsibility, but not on this Trump thing, right? Which maybe you feel that way. Maybe you're like, well, I'm down for 6 levels of responsibility, but not for that business loss, or not for that ex that really screwed me over, right? Or, the way that my mother is to me or something, right? It's like, we're good for the 6 levels of responsibility, except for that 1 or 2 moments, right? Unfortunately, that's not how this works. And it was literally only a few weekends ago that it dawned on me why Trump is a great gift for Canadians. So first and foremost, and I'll kind of speak on behalf of the entirety of Canada here, for a long time, there have been some kind of unnecessary, maybe absurd restrictions on trade between the provinces of Canada. In the United States, there's 50 states. In Alberta, in Canada, there's 10 provinces, not states, and then also 3 territories. So to have, for example, Alberta is one province and next to it is BC, British Columbia. To have the same semi-trucks go from one province to the other, the configuration of the vehicles is largely the same. They're traveling on the same roads, similar conditions of ice and snow and summertime. There can be rain or wildfires. Like it's kind of like remarkable how similar, it is to drive between the 2 provinces. And then from there, like the equipment that's on the road, it's Peterbilts and Mack trucks and Kenworths and whatnot. And like, so that's like relatively similar as well. Yet the licensing in those 2 provinces to be an instructor is different. And if you know that how to teach driving in one province, if you're an instructor to semi-trucks, your license is not eligible to teach in the next door province, despite the fact the terrain, the equipment, the roads, the conditions share a lot in common. So, with Trump saying all these things about Canada and tariffs and border issues and all the rest, it's really forced Canada. Just like how COVID helped us get over our whole fear of doing business from home, Trump is really causing Canadians to say, how can we get better within the four borders of Canada? And very quickly, we're seeing these long overdue kind of chunks of fat getting trimmed out of how Canadians do business with themselves. And so in that sense, Trump is very much a gift to Canada. Now, again, I'm not going to step over the fact that there's a lot of frustration and unnecessary, a lot of people would say, expense that Canadians are now facing because of tariffs and whatnot. So I'm not saying it's all upside, but I don't think that we can squarely look at it without acknowledging the upside, right? So I'll also say for me personally that, many, many years ago, like we're talking 25 years ago, I actually had the privilege of serving 3 Canadian prime ministers. I had like a very high level of security clearance. I literally worked with them in person in Canada's capital city, which is called Ottawa. And I kind of wondered, like, one day, could I be the prime minister of Canada? And so, maybe it's like, I was like a teenager. I was 18 years old at the time. And so like, what does my 18-year-old brain know about my future or whatnot, right? But I'm like, hey, I'm kind of flirting with the idea. I'm flirting with the idea maybe one day I could be PM. So as time has gone on and I've learned more about speaking and leadership and entrepreneurship and whatnot, and more about economics, macroeconomics, microeconomics, and how the world works, I'd say that's kind of grown, maybe to like a 3 or 4 out of 10, like maybe one day in 20 years from now, 25 years from now, maybe I'd feel the call and I'd want to go for it. And that, I'm 42 now, so it probably took me 42 years to get to like a 4 out of 10. Well, since Trump took office the second time, I've been amazed to see in myself how passionate I feel about my home country, about Canada. I've been amazed to see like actually how much I do kind of know about global geopolitics and tariffs and economics and how things kind of come and go, interest rates and whatnot. And ultimately, like, I feel a pull like never before to want to stand up for my country, Canada, in the face of other countries such as America looking to treat my country in a way that I don't appreciate. And so it's taken me 42 years to get to like a 4 out of 10 to run for prime minister. But in literally just a few months of Trump being in office for the second time, I've probably gone from like a 4 out of 10 to like a 7 out of 10. Like I've probably doubled my interest in being prime minister just from 3 or 4 months of Trump being in office. I guess it's like 6 months now. So, it hit me. I'm like, wow, maybe I co-created in my life this situation of Donald Trump, maybe in some crazy, weird spiritual way. It's like I put him in office so that he would put me into office. And when that hit me, I was like, wow, even in this really frustrating situation for Canadians, even Donald Trump is for me in my own way. So I think that really leads to the punchline to everything I'm here to talk about today. Personal responsibility at any of the levels, it really all comes down to this one thing. And that is, as Dr. David Wolfe says, I am the uncontested author of my experience of my life. And whether that is taking a look at the practical responsibility of how I made this happen, the choice I have over the emotions that I have, and at the highest level, how I've created this with the divine to help me on my journey, my life's journey, it all comes back to that. And oftentimes, we don't want that. We don't want to have to take responsibility and say, you know what, that breakup really was for me. That politician really is for me. That, in fact, every dimension of our lives is for us. And I'll tell you, probably the person who needs to hear this as much as anyone is me. And part of why I'm creating this video is so that when I end up in the dumps on something, that I can watch this video and see the sparkle in my own eye around personal responsibility. Because I'll tell you, when I do find personal responsibility in a particular issue or situation or relationship, when I can finally see it, feel it, get it, and own it, it is unbelievable new freedom that I get to feel. The challenge is that there's a price to pay. To break through into that full personal responsibility, there's a price to pay, and it often means that we need to realize something unflattering about ourselves, something about our ego doesn't want to hear it, something about our brain doesn't want to believe that it could possibly be true, that maybe that other person was right, or maybe I was wrong to say this in that one moment. And as much as I've been dug into the ground, that I've been a victim for all these years, can I actually abandon that position to accept a higher place and realize maybe this had to happen? Maybe this was a divine design between me and the divine. And that to me is all the way taking us back to those Devo lyrics, which I tend to agree with. Because life is for us, freedom of choice is what we've got. Because of our ego and the short-sighted ways that we want to protect our image and look good and stay grounded and I was right about this, because of all that, freedom from choice is often what we want. Thank you for watching. I'm cheering you on your journey. If you like this video, please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.